We are expecting more rain.
Drying out very quickly.
The call is yours for dry tyres. We are ready for you.
That is Jenson Button.
In he comes. Great.
Middle sector, Button quickest.
All the leading runners should be looking at that, surely, and coming in the pits now.
My tyres have gone off. Whose call was it to bring me in? Freaking terrible idea.
Lewis, it was a team decision. Strategy was a team decision.
Jenson Button makes it another Australian Grand Prix victory.
Oh, that feels so good!
Schumacher in the pit lane.
My tyres have gone off.
Oh, and they nearly touched.
Drying out very quickly.
Michael Schumacher has won the British Grand Prix. Can Raikkonen sweep in yet?
Brilliant strategy this afternoon.
Oh, that feels so good!
What a classic. It was a fantastic race on the track and on the pit wall for the 2010 Australian Grand Prix that saw a first win for McLaren for Jenson Button in a brilliantly devised strategic race. I'm joined by strategy masters once again, Bernie Collins, Ruth, Buscombe, Divey. Thanks for joining me to look at the 2010 Australian Grand Prix. We've done the 90s, Schumacher's been through the pits. Done the noughties, Kimi Raikkonen winning from the back, but now we're back into a wet, dry classic. Jenson Button in his best conditions, probably, Ruth.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Lewis fan that day, so I was pretty sad watching it from home. But yeah, it was masterful, excellently driven, excellently managed, and a really good example of how your strategy team isn't just the pit wall; it's also the driver in the car.
Very multifaceted, this one, I think, and this was true Jenson Button conditions. First of all, Bernie, give us the lowdown. We're back into 2010 now. We're easing towards the modern day. What are we going to look out for in the regs?
Yeah, it's much closer to what we have today, really. No refuelling. So this was the first year that there was no refuelling in the race. Very, very close to what we have. And then we also had very similar tyre regulations. So in this race, we've got a soft and hard as the dry tyres. But like we have now, if you start on the intermediate, you only need to run of those tyres. And that was very crucial to this race.
So we're back towards modern day rules. We can get our heads around that a little bit more easy. And let's have a look at the start of the race. So Jenson Button qualified fourth. So Red Bull front row lockout, but difficult conditions. And everyone here starting on the intermediates and just creeping away from the line. The Ferrari comes through. That's Felipe Massa jumping up to second place. That'll be important. Button into the first corner, side by side with Fernando Alonso. And for good measure, little clonk on the right rear. And Fernando is sent spinning to the back of the field. And Jenson really struggling in this early phase.
Yeah, he was really struggling, I think, through the entire interphase. There's a lot going on here. Teams are looking at the damage. Is the car okay? Are the tyres okay? Trying to reevaluate their strategy all the time. But crucially, when is that point to get off that intermediate tyre? And worth remembering as we go through the next little bit, a lot of the teams were looking at the radar and seeing more rain approaching.
So everyone's struggling around, and like the modern day, it's all about getting towards the slick tyre as soon as possible. But actually, Jenson's not had an easy run on the intermediates. He's been passed by his teammate Lewis Hamilton. He was sixth after the first lap contact. He's now down to seventh with Lewis ahead. And we can hear now his radio communication thinking about pitting for some slicks.
Okay, Jenson, we need an opinion on the track conditions. How many laps till dry tyres?
3 laps.
Okay, Jenson, the call is yours for dry tyres. We are ready for you.
In this lap.
So some pretty crucial messages there on the radio. Initially, McLaren saying, well, it's up to you then. And Jenson saying, hey.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, your best rain spotter is your driver. You know, the track itself, it's miles long. Having a guy out there being able to see the track condition, they know what's going on. They can feel whether or not it's getting to be dry. And also, critically, you know, we look at a crossover as a whole lap time, but actually the limit nowadays, as it was in 2010, is often just 1 or 2 corners or patches of the track. And so if your driver is confident enough to go for it, especially if they're a little bit on the back foot and they're not feeling particularly comfortable on that inter-tyre, as you say, if they've got buy-in, you've got buy-in from the pit wall, and they're splitting strategy at the moment as a team, you've got to go for it.
So McLaren, they're taking a punt here with Jenson. They got Lewis in the race as well, but from 7th, just risking it a bit.
And, you know, worth your opinion, but I think from a driving point of view, Jenson would have been less risky, would have been much more risk averse if he hadn't just been passed by Lewis. So I think there's that element of, I've lost the position anyway, let's try something different from a strategy point of view.
I'd always be in that camp. As soon as your teammates pass, like, right, I need to get back ahead with the strategy. And that is basically what happens then. So in comes Jenson, He's now on some slick tyres, and this just really shows how difficult it was for him coming out of the pits on lap 7 of the race so early on. Look at him fighting the wheel, having no grip whatsoever on the slicks. Imagine everyone on the pit wall was just looking to hope that he could make it round, and then it's all eyes to the sector tyres.
Exactly. These Bridgestone tyres actually had a little bit of a warm-up phase, similar to some of the colder races we see nowadays. So it was always this kind of scary moment that as you're kind of creeping out the pits, especially with how wet the pit lane often can be, whether or not that is going to happen.
Yeah, I think this was crucial to Jenson's race win. So he comes out of the pits on lap 7, so early on, and he goes straight off the road. So as you said, not finding the grip straight away, you're onto a wetter part of the track on the inside. Now, if I'm any other team, Bernie, I'm looking at that, bearing in mind they're all now already in the middle sector. I'm thinking, no way am I covering off this guy. He's done.
Well, that's a big risk, isn't it? Because you've watched him, everyone's frantically looking for his times coming out of the pit lane, and you see that he's nearly lost it. So you can't lose a car at this stage, you need to be in it. Now, his next sectors are much, much quicker than Lewis. So they will see the times lighten up on the board, but that first sector is still a big, big risk. And that's why people eventually don't pit the next lap, wait another lap after that.
And that gives Button a potential big advantage. Let's hear how it then played out for Lewis Hamilton when McLaren saw what was happening to his teammate.
Lewis, Jenson is out on option and is currently pink in 2 sectors. We should consider stopping.
Box this lap, okay.
Okay, box this lap, box this lap.
Box this lap, okay.
Currently pink in sectors 2 and 3. I thought it was always purple.
Technically, it was magenta because it was one of the colours they could make.
Just with a niche colour palette.
Yeah, with a very niche lighting
Gonna be
colour
magenta.
palette. Yeah, magenta.
So, magenta to purple, but either way, Button, the fastest man on the track. So that is McLaren now saying, Lewis Hamilton, you're coming in. But they've missed a lap because Button went off. Everyone's been cautious. So it's 2 laps later, Bernie, before anyone thinks about covering him.
Yeah, and that is crucial to his race, like you said. In the 2 sectors he stayed out on his outlap, and the 2 sectors that Lewis stayed out on his in-lap, so in those 4 sectors, he was over 5 seconds quicker than Lewis. And that makes massive gains through this singular pit stop and really brings him in a really strong position. His dry tyres are now up to temperature as well.
Yeah, jumping a huge amount of places, Ruth, from outside of the top 6 when he got passed by his teammate, suddenly, with eyes on the race lead. We can have a look at the race plot. It's actually quite difficult to see because we've got, just to highlight the difference in cars in 2010, Karun Chandok having a debut down there, struggling in the HRT. We've got the Lotus there, that's Heikki Kovalainen in the new teams, and the 2 Virgins as well, which spreads out the race plot somewhat. But if we zoom in, we can see in this stint, the silver McLaren has actually jumped himself up into 2nd place.
Yeah, exactly. Just like we have nowadays. What you can win and lose through a correct call during wet, it's almost 10 times the amount you have in a normal undercut. And remember, this is pre-DRS, so overtaking is so difficult. And this is pre the new track configuration in Melbourne, pre the new zones we have. So track position is so key that, you have P2. That is a huge, huge win round here.
And it was a crucial pass that Button put on Robert Kubica, who's having a fine race for Renault, who was up in 2nd place. Button passed him at turn 14, which got him into that 2nd place as well, cementing the 5-place gain on the outlap. The other interesting thing I thought at this point is they've all put on soft tyres, which seems bold to potentially get to the end of the race or narrow down their options.
Yeah, I think for this track, the soft tyre was working really well. When you come out on those slippy conditions that we've seen Jenson pit under, you need the most grip available to you, and that's generally the softest tyre. And then it's about managing that tyre as well as you can to whatever your chosen pit stop is. And like we say, they don't need to stop again, which becomes the crucial next stint in this.
That's always the second part, isn't it? It's firstly, can you put on a slick tyre and scrabble round? Secondly, what tyre can you put on? Because they can grain so easily in these conditions. So Jenson's fully aware of that. We have, at this point, the dark blue line there, the royal blue of Sebastian Vettel, who's leading the race quite nicely at this point, starting to ease away from Jenson Button out front. But quite an important radio message was this one. Let's listen in.
Okay, Jenson, you are P2. Vettel is pulling away. Pick the pace up if you can.
So Red Bull did have 1-2 at the start. They went long in a kind of McLaren 2024 Silverstone strategy where Piastri was the Mark Webber, his compatriot, on this day as well. Home race for Webber, ended up getting shuffled well down the order. But Vettel still leads. And Jenson Button is told, pick up the pace if you can. Your rival's moving away. And he basically says, I can't without damaging the tyres, which is quite an interesting mindset for a driver quite early on in the race, Ruth, to think, is he already thinking about just going to the end on this set of soft tyres?
Yeah, I think he is. And I think this is another great example of where, your driver, they're not just driving around these tracks, but they're actually also a key member of your strategy department. Twice he's helped that strategy department by giving them, good feedback, saying, actually, look, I know how much energy I can put into the tyre without, it really going over the limit. And remember, in terms of the tools that the teams had, we've made big changes, even in the last, 14 years, in terms of how we as teams are able to follow the amount of energy going into a tyre across a race. Actually, back in 2010, your driver was probably your most accurate sensor to know if, just as you say, if you were pushing too much to open up the graining, even with a tyre like a Bridgestone that could do the race distance on wear. It's not going to happen that if you start graining and you're leaving rubber all around Australia.
It's pretty perfect call at this point for Button. Remember, this is just his second race for McLaren on the back of his World Championship. So I'm sure the team were becoming quite impressed quite quickly with him. If we look back at the race plot then, we will see the end of the race for Sebastian Vettel, who has a mechanical retirement and he's off, which then gives Button the race lead. Now, I don't know if Vettel might have run into trouble. Was he pushing the tyres too hard? Was the Red Bull too good? Either way, it was unfortunate for Sebastian. But we get another big moment coming up. Second round of pit stops for some. Quite a big call, this one. We've got Lewis Hamilton charging through the field and we've got Mark Webber charging through the field, getting stuck in behind Robert Kubica. They're sort of third, they're fifth, they're trying to charge their way through and probably the only ones that could match Jenson Button out front. But they choose to pit, Bernie.
Yeah, and exactly that. Like you say, in traffic, as Ruth said, for all of the reasons, overtaking was more difficult than we've sometimes seen it. Webber's decision, I think, was a little bit easier. He was at the back of that pack. He thought, let's go, let's try something different. Then we have actually in the sort of turquoise, we've got Rosberg, and then in the silver again, we've got Hamilton, who both choose to cover that, even though maybe they don't need to. We don't know how it would have panned out if they'd stood out, but they both cover that pit stop in order to try and come back through the field. Crucially, though, the two red Ferraris and the yellow of Kubica both stay on track, both commit to that one stop, and that's what makes the end of their race.
So then we have a late race charge from Hamilton, from Webber, but as you said, the two Ferraris now acting as kind of extra teammates for Jenson Button, holding them back. And Alonso was stuck behind Massa. Remember, there was no team orders allowed. This was earlier in the season from when Fernando was faster than Felipe Massa, famously in Hockenheim with a coded message. And it means they're all buffered up behind Robert Kubica, who's having a fantastic drive, not passed by anyone on track. So that's second, third and fourth. Then Hamilton charges back up again, but it's not long until he starts to struggle back in the traffic.
Tyres have gone off. My tyres have gone off. Whose call was it to bring me in? Freaking terrible idea.
Lewis, it was a team decision. Strategy was a team decision.
You could have asked me if my tyres were okay. My tyres were fine.
So happy families on one side of the McLaren garage, Ruth. On the other side, not so much. Lewis frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing to see, how young he sounds then. And you hear how he talks nowadays about how, it's a team call. And you really see the passion that you have with these drivers, especially in their first years. He's there up against world champion incoming. He was the man that was the man of the team. Then it all changes around. You can understand his frustration. Ultimately, did McLaren make the wrong call? Could they have done slightly better with his car? Yes. Is that the way the cookie crumbles sometimes? Also, yes. And slightly prophetic, isn't it? Boxing to cover Webber and then, ultimately losing the chance to win the race, because that's ultimately what ended up with a championship loss for Fernando Alonso in Abu Dhabi at the end of the year.
A frustrated Lewis Hamilton. A frustrated Ruth Buscombe, I'm sure, as well, wanting him to do better from the sofa at home. Frustrated Mark Webber, and those two collided right at the end in what could have been a costly blow to all of their championships at the end. This was a thrilling season, wasn't it, in 2010? But on the other side, a jubilant win for Jenson Button. It's only right he has the final say in this one.
Yeah! Oh, that feels so good!
Absolutely fantastic drive, Jenson. Brilliant.
Guys, amazing job. I think we timed our pit stop pretty much perfect. A little bit slippery out there, but it was the right time. We got a bit of a lucky break with making the right choice, but I don't think our pace was too bad considering the amount of laps that we did on these tyres. So yeah, guys, fantastic job. Congratulations to everyone. This is a great way to start the year.
Yep, great drive in the early conditions, Jenson. Really good.
And there we have it, 3 decades of strategy genius playing out through the 90s, the noughties, and a 2010 wet-dry race to finish. Which one's been your favourites, guys?
I think for me it has to be the 2010 Jenson Button. I really enjoyed it. I love that it's so close to the strategies that we have now and still quite different to what we've seen recently.
Ruth?
I love a quirky one. So, I'm going to stick with 1998 and the godfather of race strategy, still to this day, Ross Brawn and his regulation win.
I've got to go 2005 then, haven't I? Kimi Räikkönen from the back, winning on the last lap. Strategy genius and a little bit of driver flair as well. Anyway, we've loved bringing them all to you. Thanks very much to the two of you. And if you think we've missed out any that you'd like us to see maybe next year, then drop it in the comments. In the meantime, it's bye for now.